Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our study in the first letter to the Corinthians by Paul, dated around AD 56. We're going to continue with our look in chapter 4. We're going to take a look at 4 verses 6 through 10. We'll finish up 3 and begin 4, 6 through 10. And we want to continue on with the theme of Paul's ethics of new temple building. Ethics of new temple building. Let's take a look at block 1. We'll take a look at 3:21 to 23. All things for building the new temple are in Christ. And Paul says, first, negate all sensate wisdom and the sensate lifestyle. Do not glorify the things of sensate humanity. And Paul says, basically, all things, all spiritual gifts, all spiritual strengths and abilities and gifts are already yours. And then a note 2 in verse 22, Paul says that believers have access to the current resources and to future possibilities. All things are at hand for the ethics of temple building, including future possibilities. And Paul says all these things are already in your possession. You don't need to acquire sensate privilege and sensate wisdom. You already have everything you need in Christ. And that's his conclusion in verse 23, because you are in Christ. And, technically he says you are of Christ. He uses de Christou, but you are of Christ, and Christ is of God. So you belong to God through Christ. That means that you live within the faithful obedience of Christ to the Father. His faithfulness toward the Father is a faithfulness that you live within. Therefore, you have all things already in your possession because you are in Christ, the Messiah. So Paul is letting the believers know that you have everything you need to live the Christian life. You have everything you need to live authentically in Christ. Now in block 2, we're going to take a look at the ongoing judgment of Christ as Lord. And Paul says, I want to talk to you about concerning our being evaluated during the ethics of temple building, during the temple building process. And he says that we are officers of Christ. We are officers of the mysteries of God when we participate in building our ethics of temple building. And I've got a little note here from the Garland commentary. The huperetes was one who willingly learns his task and goal from another who is over him. And then being a steward of God's mysteries, Paul was saying that basically he was responsible for distributing the mysteries of Christ to others in his ministry. His task was to proclaim and convey the mysterion to Christou, the mystery of Christ, the mystery of God's truth unveiled in Christ. And Paul goes on to say that the one requirement is that all believers are to be faithful. The requirement of your ethics of temple building, your ethics of new temple building, is to be faithful. That is a requirement for the believer. In our ethics of new temple building, we are to be faithful. And he uses the tense that says we are to be a remaining faithful believer. We are to continue in faithful obedience to Christ, faithful discipleship. And Paul says you need to do this because any sensate evaluation, any sensate judgment, any sensate accomplishment is insignificant when compared to Christ. He said, the perspective of humanity, of secular humanity, is insignificant when compared to the discernment and judgment of Christ, who is the Kyrios Lord over all creation. Basically, Paul says that I've already told you that the foundation for your ethics is the mind of Christ. I've told you that the design for ethics is the building of the new temple of God. And now I'm telling you that the inspection agency, the regulatory agency for the ethics of your new temple building ethic, is Jesus Christ as Lord. He is the one who discerns and judges and evaluates. So I've given you the foundation, I've given you the design, and I'm giving you He who regulates and judges this ethics. And it is Christ as Kyrios Lord. And that's why Paul can go on in block 3, verses 4 through 6, that Christ as Lord makes manifest His judgment as we participate in this process of sanctification, this ethics of new temple building. So Paul goes on to say that justification is based on Christ as Lord. Basically, it is not by sensate evaluation that we have been justified in this new temple building process. It's only a justification received in Christ, the pisteos Christou, the faithfulness of Christ. We are justified solely by Christ, by pisteos Christou, the faithfulness of Christ, pisteos Christou. That is our foundation for our ethics, period. Paul goes on to say, don't judge anything prematurely because Christ will make all things manifest. Keep yourself within eschatological time. That means evaluate your ethics according to eschatological time. And eschatological time was inaugurated in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So he says, keep eschatological time as your focal point. You do not judge things prematurely because God's plan shall be brought to fulfillment in Christ. Christ will make all things manifest. So don't judge anything prematurely concerning new temple building, the ethics of new temple building, because Christ will bring everything to light, all things hidden in darkness. He will declare and show forth the motivations of every heart, of every believer, and those who plant true spiritual growth, those who minister true spiritual growth, will receive reward and praise from God. They shall be rewarded according to the ministry of the Spirit. They shall receive the reward of praise from God. And then a very critical verse is verse 6. It's really a key verse for this lesson because it takes up a very interesting concept that we need to talk about, meta-schematizo. And let me just say a few words about the Greek concept meta-schematizo. Schematizo is basically in the New Testament, that's the plan of salvation. That's the spiritual design of God's kingdom. So it's schematizo is plan of salvation, God's design for all of His creation. Now, meta as a prefix means transcendence. So the plan that God has for all creation is a transcendent, apocalyptically unveiled design that's unveiled in Jesus Christ as crucified and resurrected. And Paul says that our ethic is supposed to be according to the meta-schematizo of the revelation in Jesus Christ. Verse 6 is very important. The meta-schematizo in Christ is our overarching design for our ethics of new temple building. He says, that's the structure that I'm outlining to you. That's the mystery I am unfolding for you, the mystery in Christ. Christ is the metaschematizo of God's plan of salvation for all creation. And he says, and that does not go beyond the written word that has been prophesied in the written word. I am not going beyond the gegraptai written word. I am not going beyond the written word. The scriptures have testified to Christ as Messiah. Isaiah prophesied the suffering Messiah would come. And I'm not going beyond the written prophecies, but Christ is the metaschematizo design of salvation for all of creation from the Father. It is revealed in Jesus Christ. This is, and then from Garland, his commentary, he agrees. He says, metaschematizo is arrangement or formation or design, which is given to Paul's ethics. And that is unveiled in the mysterion to Christou, the mystery of Christ, unveils the design of salvation. So Paul said, I was commissioned to preach and to teach the true design of salvation, the true plan of salvation for all of creation that is given to us in the revelation in Jesus Christ. Paul says, that is my commission, to teach and preach this mysterion to Christou, this mystery of Christ. So I've got a little bit of an inserted little block here that gives us a little summary triad. And so we look at that. Therefore, the Lordship of Christ judges our new temple building process ethic. 2. Christ makes manifest the motivations of the heart, and we will be judged according to our motivations of the heart. Do we plant true spiritual seed? And 3, we are to follow the schematizo design that has been passed on by Paul, and that is what? The mind of Christ as foundation, new spiritual temple as design, and the governing Lordship of Christ as advocate. Foundation, design, and advocate. That's the schematizo. Foundation, mind of Christ. Design, new spiritual temple. And advocate, the governing Lordship of Christ. Foundation, design, and advocate. That's the schematizo design of our ethics that Paul is teaching in this letter. From here we do want to go on and take a look at column 4. We want to take a look at this metaschematizo design of ethics. So if you look at note 1, verse 4-7, Paul says, negate argumentative contention within the church. He says, what is it that you individually possess that causes you to contend with one another in a prideful way? Because everything that you have was received through grace, not due to individual merit. You have nothing to glory in of yourself. So why do you glory in yourself when really you received all of this as a gift of grace? So Paul says, first of all, stop arguing amongst yourselves. Stop arguing within your fellowship. And he says in verse 8, because all sensate enrichment is a false reality. It's a false wish and a false reality. You are already claiming to be enriched. You are already reigning like kings. And by the way, he's being sarcastic here. And he says, I wish that were so, but it is, of course, not the case. So he says, your secular arrogance, your secular pride, you act like you're already to be glorified. You're already the enriched ones. You're already the reigning believers like kings. And he says, that's not the case. Your sensate pride is a sin. Your sensate pride is a sin. And he's going to bring that home in note 3, verses 9 and 10. Because Paul says, instead, become weak in Christ. And he continues with this sarcasm. He says, We apostles are the last to be made manifest. We are appointed unto death. We are a spectacle to others. We are fools on account of Christ. We are weak in Christ. So we are not like you. You glory in yourselves. We apostles consider ourselves weak, crucified with Christ. He says you should be taking up humility, not pride. Pride is a sin. He says, you, however, are strong and honored. And so I got a little conclusive note here in note 4, column 4, note 4 at the bottom. Therefore, the metaschematizo of ethics for Paul is, number 1, negate secular contention and argument. 2, all secular enrichment is a false reality, a false wish. 3, instead, humility and weakness in Christ is the true shape of Christian ethics. Be humble, be contrite, be crucified with Christ. That's the true shape that your Christian ethic should have. So Paul closes out a great teaching here. We've got great teaching from 3:21 to 4:10, and it gives us a great look at the shape or the schema, tidzo, design of Paul's ethics. But again, we will have a recall triad to kind of give a encapsulated summary of this lesson. It's got a lot of content to it, quite a bit of content, but we will have a recap and a recall triad next.